Welcome to the Corrective Culture podcast. Me and Callan are really tired. We just finished an episode with Matt Walden and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Again.
We spoke about a couple of upcoming workshops, Scientific Core Workshop and his own personal workshop going into the psyche and how we can all reflect amongst each other in our relationships and in ourselves, seeing how our emotions are actually changing our direction of our lives and unintentionally, you know? And for the people listening, like it's a good recap and if you are wanting to get into this field, like this is the sort of stuff you come to. You know, you fly here, whatever you're gonna do, you come here and you hang out with us. The whole crew's gonna be here. Even Susie Neville's coming over.
So Donald around.
All the full Chek crew. So if you just want to come hang out, it's gonna do it at the gym. We're gonna work out. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna eat good food.
Yeah, and, fucking oath. And the course is open to everyone, so that
anyone.
Scientific Core, right? That'll be open to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so will Matt's 2 workshops he's doing.
Yeah, his one he's doing. Yeah.
One he's doing, sorry. Yeah, 2 including the core. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Jump on board. It's going to be epic. And in the podcast, we talked a lot about the core. So, you know, it's a very important thing to know. So tune in.
Yeah, Scientific Core. Let's go into that, and I guess and
that's a workshop that Matt's going to be teaching here, and yeah, let's get into the core. Like what? Because I know the first one with Paul, so it's going to be all new videos in this new thing that you're filming with the Chek Institute, but you're also going to teach it here. What's the difference? Like,
yeah, well, obviously, just really everything's updated. One of the key differences is that what we're doing is throughout the course we're illustrating the teachings, if you like, with different case studies. So we've got 4 different kind of what they call them, like avatars, you know. And so you've got someone who's, you know, a middle-aged woman who's deconditioned, and then you've got a guy who's overweight, and then you've got someone who's a CrossFitter, and then you've got someone who's I forget the 4th avatar, but basically everyone who's, you know, they're all in slightly different shape, they're all got slightly different health concerns, you know, they're fatigued, some of them, and some of them are more, you know, athletic, and so it's showing, you know, what assessments we would expect. So as we go through different assessments of the core, we might expect the CrossFitter's got a good core, right? But the person who's out of shape and overweight, that perhaps their core function isn't so good, but then maybe the CrossFitter actually has a little bit of irritable bowel, and so therefore they might pass some of the strength tests, but they're not passing the stability tests, that kind of thing. So as we go through and we're teaching the assessments, whereas before it was just like, oh, this is the prone transversus abdominis tests, or this is the, you know, oblique test. Now we're sort of saying, okay, well, this person has these injuries or these conditions, so this is what we'd expect to find on the test for them. And then we go into exercises and going through different, you know, ways to work out the core. And so then we say, well, you know, for this person, this would be the optimal exercise selection, you know. So we're actually, I think, making it a little bit more real world and sort of accessible, so that people get it's not just an academic concept, like this is how you test this muscle. It's like thinking about how it actually work in the real world.
That's really cool, man. That's really cool, because that I feel like that was the gap, I guess, when I first started watching, was I guess it showed a lot of really cool concepts, but then it just showed exercises. But then I was like, I was like, what's this exercise good for? What's this exercise? Like, I didn't understand at the time joint actions and what was actually happening during that exercise. I didn't have the knowledge to break down that exercise. And I think that's going to be gold. Like, I think that really helps empower. That would help empower me. And I know it would help empower a lot of the new guys coming into it, especially locally.
Yeah. And for like people listening who don't know much about the core, or who are just looking to get into it, like, why is the core so important, as opposed to like going and seeing, not to bag physios or anything, but like going to see someone who's just going to work on the elbow, as opposed to like, you know, why should you learn the core? Why should you do scientific back? Why should you do scientific core first?
Yeah, well, you know, it kind of stems back to when scientific core conditioning first came out, because came out, I think 1999 was the first version of it, and it was right at that time, it was a super hot topic, because in the previous few years people had started to realize that you know, especially low back pain, was often driven by deficits in the core, and that when you get low back pain, it causes deficits in the core. So it's kind of like a two-way street. You know, if you've got dysfunction or weakness or inhibition of muscles, so they're not firing properly in the core or the back, then that can lead on to low back pain. But equally, the research was showing that if you've got low back pain, that inhibits these key stabilizer muscles. And so it was all new, and everyone was developing exercises for it, and you know, it was kind of the thing, I guess, that a lot of therapists were learning about, a lot of trainers were learning about. But there are quite a few nuances missing from that, and which we, you know, we can talk a bit more about the nuances a bit later. But basically, there's always a rebound with these things, and so by the time you kind of got to like 2008, 2010, what you started to find was research studies coming out saying, oh, it's not all about the core. So, you know, in the 90s, like, oh, we found out the core is really important. And then in the 2000s, it's like, wait a minute, you know, this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And there's this paper which was very popular, research paper called The Myth of Core Stability. And it was kind of pulling, you know, the sort of rug out from the idea that core stability was important. But actually, if you really delved into the physiology of it and really understood the testing and the techniques for rehabilitating the core, like for example, the notion that you don't just isolate a muscle and leave it at that, but you actually isolate muscle that is, let's say, if you've got, you know, one muscle that's not firing so well, it's a good idea to isolate that and to start working it. But then you always want to reintegrate that into functional movement patterns, which is what Paul Chek was so good at doing, and you know, so good at teaching. And so anyway, there was kind of backlash, which meant that then there's all these kind of controversies where you got one group of therapists or trainers that think, oh, the core's been debunked. You know, this is a classic thing that you see on social media, isn't it? Oh, that's been debunked. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about this, because there's a lot more nuance to it. But I think in terms of the importance of it, what people started to realize, it wasn't just you know, people with low back pain that had core issues, but actually that it was people with knee injuries and hip injuries and ankle injuries and elbow injuries and shoulder injuries. And the reason for that is that, you know, almost every movement you make, you're generating stability at the core, so that you can then generate power from the ground upwards. And so that's normally from the foot, of course. So sometimes, you know, if you're doing a cartwheel or a handspring or something like that, it would be from the hands first. But whatever's in contact with the earth or with the fixed point, you know, like in a chin up, obviously you're holding onto a bar, that's your fixed point. But those forces have to be transferred through the core to act on the rest of the body. So, you know, in most activities, like I say, you're standing up or walking or running or jumping or whatever. So the loads are coming up through the legs into the core, and then they're having to be expressed quite often through the arms to throw something or to hit something, or to, you know, just when you're running, your arms are kind of essentially dissipating the loads that are coming up through the body as you run. And that all has to be transferred through the core. And it's not just sporting things. It's like going to pick up a kettle or pick up a big pot of water. You know, you might be boiling some vegetables or something in a big pan, and you go to pick that up. And if you're very, what we call arm dominant, so you're really using the arm to pick that thing up, and you're not using your body to lift and engage through the legs and through the core and into the arm, then what you end up with is overuse injuries in the arm. Because essentially you're over recruiting the muscles, you know, like your wrist flexors or your shoulder muscles. And so then across time, that creates stress and then eventually strain. And then someone comes in with say a shoulder injury or an elbow injury, like tennis elbow would be a good one. And what you find is that their tennis stroke is very arm dominant. They're hitting the ball with their arm and not actually engaging and driving through the legs and driving through the core. And often that's because the core isn't working very well, you know. So it's really a place where loads get transferred between the limbs, and therefore super important in performance in general.
God, yeah. I mean, and when you feel it, eh? Like you feel else. The homework I actually sent you, man, it's like that's what I think of. Like, her core was like I've seen a lot more females. It's weird. Like their rib angle, it's like their rib angle's all right, but she's still sort of kyphotic. I don't know. Do you see that much where their rib angles are all right, but they still got a kyphosis?
Yeah, you can see that. I mean, obviously, it tends to be that you'll get an increased rib angle with an increased kyphosis.
Yeah.
But the thing with the body is that there's just patterns, and you can't always expect those patterns to remain consistent. So we talk about this a lot, don't we, with the pelvis, saying that if you've got an anterior tilt on the pelvis, you expect to find a lordosis, an increased curve in the low back.
Yeah.
And often that's not the case. Often you'll find that there's an anterior pelvis, but also a flat back, and it doesn't really add up biomechanically. But it just means you've got to get your thinking brain on, right, and work out what could drive that.
Yeah, right.
And so then with the example of the pelvis, that's fairly easy, because you just think about, okay, well, which muscles attached to the pelvis but not to the back. So when we're thinking about a hyperlordosis, we often think that the psoas might be pulling that forwards. The rec fem might be involved in tilting the pelvis anterior as well. The lumbar erectors might be increasing their tone. But when you don't have that, then you think, okay, if they've got that anterior tilt but a flat back, well, it's fairly certain that psoas isn't short and tight, because that's attached to the back, right? So then you think, okay, so the psoas probably isn't driving that. And of course, you can test that. We know the test for that, the Thomas test. But it's probably a muscle that's just attaching to the pelvis and not to the back, right? So a muscle like the rec fem or the TFL or the sartorius or the adductors, they all can pull the pelvis forwards, but they're not necessarily going to do much to the back, right? Because they don't actually attach into the back.
Yeah.
So with the ribs, you need to think in the same way, but it's a bit more tricky because it's, the musculature is a bit more complex in a way.
Yeah. And that's why I think about with scientific core, how it's so good that it goes through the exercises as well. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. And because like, and it's also the isolation thing, but like also training the movement pattern, because they may still do that exercise shit. And like they may do the exercise, I should say, well, but move. Like I remember I gave her a play with the wood chop, and whenever she rotates, it's just lumbar extension. Every time she's not extending in her thoracic. It's just right under those bottom ribs, which is where her pain is too.
Right.
And it's like that little hinge point. Even in a resting posture, you can see it. It's like, fuck, that would hurt. I can touch the spot, Yeah. And she's like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But and it's a cool thing, because that's what Paul's model and the scientific core model of training the movement patterns is so gold, hey, and not just like strengthening the deficits, because she is now only just realizing, she goes, I've realized I've just been hanging off my shit all day long. Like I've just been walking, just doing this, like even I pull her up when she's in here, when she talks to me, and she'll just hang off her hip or constantly hanging into that position. And now it's starting to feel better for her, she told me. It's still there, but starting to feel better, because she's becoming more aware of her everyday life, of when she's just hinging off that joint instead of relying just on an exercise program. Because the exercise program is now starting to train that, which is now the phase 2 type stuff. So I'm like, fuck, it's all at the start, man. It's so like, all right. But now it's like, oh, that's genius.
Yeah, like the primal pattern movements are just genius, I reckon.
Yeah.
Just the
They
way,
are.
yeah.
They are brilliant. Yeah. It's one of those concepts that the more you understand it, the more you realize how brilliant it is. It's so clever.
And
more you sort of move to learning and stuff.
I feel like we're so blessed that was our introduction. That's all I ever knew. So for us, it sort of seems so obvious now. But like even my roommate's got a girl over having dinner with right now, and we were just chatting about water, and she's like, oh, what do you mean you drink tap water? Like you don't drink tap water? And I was like, fuck, you forget that. That's so normal for us now, but that's so new to a lot of people. And I'm like, they haven't heard of like seed oils or nothing. Like it's all just, you forget your circle is it, but same thing with the Chek stuff, man. It's like you forget how that's all we were taught from the start.
Oh, wait till you start banging a drum and doing tarot in your fucking lounge room, and then someone messages you like, "You're right, dude. You've lost the plot."
Yeah, fuck
But
up.
one of the cool things about Scientific Core is that Australia is one of the places where it was like the mecca for core research, right? So you
Yeah.
had what's called the Queensland group,
Mm.
which was Richardson, Joel Hodges, and Hides. These four researchers from Queensland, and they published some of the best early research on the core. And one of Paul's kind of cool stories about it, you're talking about this idea of integration, which is what the primal patterns really teach. And I forget who it was. I think it might have been the Canterbury Crusaders that Paul's working with. It was one of
It was the
the big
Canberra Raiders.
teams. Oh,
Cam
Canberra Raiders. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think he might have worked with Canterbury over in New Zealand as
NZ,
well.
yeah.
But he yeah, there's a story he tells about going in, and because the physios were really up on core function, they had these guys all doing work with the calf on the floor. A lot of them had injuries, a lot of them had back pain, and you know they weren't getting better. And so they asked Paul to go in to consult, and Paul watched them doing the primal patterns and said, well, look, their core's not working. And the physios are going, well, we know their core's working because we're using cuffs and biofeedback
Mm.
and other, maybe ultrasound, and we can see that it's working properly. And Paul said, but that's why they're laying down,
Mm.
right? When you stand them up straight away, you can see their core's not working because you're training them in isolation.
Mm.
They need to be trained in integration as well. It's not just the isolation. And so they had this sort of really high number of injuries. And so that was kind of Paul's contribution to that rehabilitation process, was actually teaching them how to go from isolation to integration, which again, to us as Chekies, that's kind of just part of the learning process and part of what we do with our clients. And
Yeah.
it seems everyday logic, but still in many kind of rehabilitation settings,
Mm.
the focus is very much on, oh, you find a muscle that's weak, you activate the muscle. And normally, the interesting thing clinically is normally by then that client is either significantly improved or they're completely out of pain,
Mm.
because they've been resting, they've been doing their rehab exercises, getting some treatment. Maybe they're 3, 4, 5 weeks down the line. Most back pain is self-remitting, so it basically goes on its own within about 6 weeks. I think it's 80% of low back pain goes without any intervention within 6 weeks. So often it looks like the manual therapist has made the difference, but actually, if the individual hadn't been to see a manual therapist, it would have gone in 6 weeks anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite funny. But so that, yeah, so then the point is that then they're feeling better having done these isolation exercises, so they assume that was the remedy. And sometimes it is, to be fair, but often it's not, because you haven't built that back into an integrated movement pattern. So then they go back to playing their sport, whatever it is, or doing their activities of daily living, and their pain comes back again. And it's like, oh, well, why didn't that work? And it's because it's been, isolation-based training and not taking it that next step into the integration.
Yeah.
So that's what we teach on Scientific Core, right?
Mm.
You think it'd be hard, I guess they're getting paid well enough to do it though, to isolate every player's issues, and because they'd want to summate a big workout program for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But like you say, you got someone that, say they do a single arm, like how good would a single arm cable push be for anyone that palms people off in footy all the time, right? Like that, like extended range serratus.
Yeah.
And there would be huge imbalances between two people all the time on that. But I guess they wouldn't really want to be changing the sets on each weaknesses, or more sets on the weak side and things like that. So there's so many ways that you wonder how we're going to evolve with that as sports.
Yeah.
Like, because we're always, I mean, we're breaking constantly. Or are we constantly breaking records? Like, we're getting faster every year. I don't know. Like,
No.
I heard there's I think 80% of Olympic records haven't been broken since 1960s or some shit. So I saw some stat the other day, which I thought it was
Yeah.
wouldn't have been that.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah.
So it's like we're almost not. Thought we would have been evolving, but yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a good point.
I mean, obviously there are records that are broken still, and
Yeah,
some of
yeah.
that's just due to improved science, obviously improved nutrition, improved drugs.
Yeah, the Russians.
I mean, so on that front, I was taught on my master's degree by a guy who'd been involved in British athletics for about 25 years. at the top levels, and he worked with all the top names. And he basically told us as a group, you know, you can't get to the top level without using something, and everyone knows what's being tested for, so they just take something that's not being tested for.
Right.
And he said for the first 10 or 15 years he was working at that elite level, he was telling people the normal message, you know, oh, don't do it, you know, you're just cheating yourself, you'll get caught, you know, all this kind of stuff, it's not worth it. And he said after 10, 15 years working at that elite level, he just accepted it's part of the sport. And he said the reason that they can't get it out of the sport is that if they did, there would be no records broken and the sport would lose all its funding because it'd just be dull.
Yeah.
So they have to let them take performance enhancing drugs. It's just, if they're testing for nandrolone next month, all the athletes will know that. And so they'll stop taking nandrolone this month and they'll switch it to a different anabolic.
Wow.
Right? Which isn't being tested for.
For those anabolic things, man, like what's the cost for that? Obviously they're all dying of heart attacks in their 40s and 50s eventually, right? We see that. But what's is there, because you know how, what's your thoughts on people, say a UFC fighter, Conor McGregor, snaps his leg. He goes on steroids to heal it. They all go on steroids to heal these things. Does that make sense? Or is that, you know, because I always thought about like the ligaments and the laxity and those sort of issues. Wouldn't it stem like, because I remember there's a couple of, there's only 3 people I know that have done bicep ruptures locally, and they're all steroid users. So they all ripped their bicep from the proximal part, and they were all ex-steroid users. So I don't know, but I remember I listened to something about like the muscle. Like, do the steroids also grow ligaments and tendons, or is it just muscle?
I think they're generally anabolic, but I think the issue is that tendons and ligaments cannot develop at the same rate that muscles do because they've got such poor perfusion of blood. So you can develop. This is one of the things with tendon injuries in general, is that often you get tendon injuries when you've really gone through a hypertrophy phase and you've started to improve strength, and the muscles got stronger than the tendon can handle. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the tendons just don't adapt nearly as nearly as quickly. So it takes longer. So this is one of the things when we were talking a lot about barefoot running, when I was involved with the 5 finger shoes, you know, there was various formulae for how you should transition from your running shoes to your 5 fingers. And one of the basic formulae was to, start at 10% of what you'd normally do and then build up at 10% per week for 10 weeks, which obviously is kind of cool. But it doesn't allow you very long for your connective tissues, like your muscle. For a muscular development program, that would be quite good, because if you think, let's say someone runs 10K, so you say, okay, well, you know, switch to your 5 fingers, do 1K in your 5 fingers running. So this is a technique that we used to suggest, is that people run with their running shoes on their hands and their 5 fingers on their feet. Okay, so they do the first 1K with their 5 fingers on, and they switch to their running shoes, put their 5 fingers on their hands, and then they run the 9K cool. with their 5 fingers on their hands. So that's 10% of the 10K, right? And so the next week they do 2K in the 5 fingers. So this was kind of, you know, a protocol that was recommended, but the reality is that's giving you 10 weeks to get up to kind of full distance, and there's no way your tendons can acclimatize in that time period. They're going to take. We as a company recommended between 6 to 18 months for the transition. Because that allows your connective tissues to develop.
Did have you looked into? I'm not sure if we spoke about that. We had him on the podcast, but do you know Keith Barr's work?
No, I don't know.
Well, I think he was in the University of California, but he's in Holland now. But he did a lot of the research on tendons, and there's a million podcasts out there with him in ligaments and collagen. Okay. So done a lot with collagen and gelatin. But he goes, what they've found is with like mice and whatever not, they synthesize these like tendons and loaded them and all these sort of things. And the tendon and all the passive tissue will stop getting a signal to adapt after about roughly 10 minutes. So he goes, he gets his people to go for like a 10-minute run. And then he goes, your muscles will keep adapting for the next hour, but the signal won't get again for the tendons. So you only got a chance of injuring yourself post that. And then he said it's about a 6 to 8 hour gap before it will allow signals again. So if you would get that person to a 10-minute run in the morning, 10-minute run in the afternoon, and that will give them a constant signal response to keep adapting the connective tissue. And who was the elite runner he uses? That American chick, isn't it?
Yeah, American chick.
Like one of the best in the world. I forget her name.
Yeah.
Is it Camille or something?
Yeah, I think she's...
Oh, but he goes, she'll beat everyone else, and he goes and she runs less, but she gets more of these shorter runs in. So she's actually trains the connective tissue and not just the muscles. So
that's cool.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it would apply to lifting as well, wouldn't it? So you know, the fact that he's done that research.
Yeah.
You know, there's been quite a lot of popularity for things like the Jefferson deadlift, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you're getting full spinal flexion, right? When you lift the bar from the ground, which historically was kind of quite frowned upon because there was all this thing about you keep a neutral spine and so on, which is obviously good advice if you're lifting heavy. But the Jefferson curl, I think it's called, that one has been more popular because it's training the spine through a full range of flexion. And it puts stress onto the connective tissues. But like you say, if that's the research, then it suggests you shouldn't be doing those Jefferson curls for more than 10 minutes at a time. And then, you know, perhaps have a second training session later in the day if that's what you want to develop. But that would have to be properly qualified, right? As we know, as Chek is, you know, so many people have posterior disc bulges that you want to make sure that you're not aggravating something like that.
I had a
and
client that did a Jefferson curl at the gym, but she already had the flattest lumbar spine you've ever seen. And then she ended up blowing a disc.
Really?
Yeah, it was Tiffany.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he also, that's including the rest period a lot of the time. So say he's got Achilles tendonitis, he'll use the isometric loading, 30 seconds on, 2 minutes off, up till about 10 minutes, including the rest period. So only like probably going to get 3 to 4 sets of that. But they found patella holes in patella tendons of 2 years, like chronic. And the surgeon said, you have to repair this with surgery. And they did isometric, just like knee extension machine to bring into the force through the rec fem into the patella tendon, and it's completely sealed the hole up for these like couple of the athletes they had. So they tested the theory and basically said isometric at an eccentric capacity within pain. And he goes, the rule was just being slow. So he goes, slow eccentrics is the standard of care, but he goes, we found it's just mainly the slow part. So the isometric was the slowest to, I guess, and lengthen it will pull it and close that hole. If that makes sense? Yeah. So I know.
So you're saying isometric is more important than eccentric, or
so he was say he's got Achilles tendonitis. He was saying the isometric seemed to be the important part to get the loading through the tendon. Then in an eccentric spot though. So he goes, it just had to be slow. Like,
I see. Yeah,
but he still gets people doing like jump rope and that eventually. Like I have to break it down, but I don't know. It was interesting. Yeah, he works with a lot of athletes and that, and tested it on some few people. But yeah, I'll send you that podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's great.
So the workshop too. So Scientific Core, you get the date for that. Do you know the date off the top of your head for that right now?
Yeah, I think it's the 1st of March, Saturday 1st of March.
Cool. Saturday 1st of March.
At your place, right?
At Corrective, and we'll promote it. And that's so gold for the people listening. There's a lot of like Chekies that listen to this podcast in Australia. So like for the guys listening, because I know there's a crew down New South Wales and that like when you're all in, like when you come to Australia and Sydney, I was scaffolding wage, you know what I mean? I booked flights, accommodation, flew to Sydney for that stuff. And it pays off. Because think about how I was talking about that, realizing the benefits make the benefits real all the time. You told me that there, and that's one of those big things that you'd pay someone $5,000 for that knowledge, even though it's a little gem of conceptual wisdom. It's like it was worth it. That and the whole because I'm into, I guess I didn't know I was really into evolution, but I am. And that sparked it.
Well, I think most people are, because it's what they like you say, even if you don't realize. It's like it's the story of how you got here. So it's your own story, right? And so when you sort of can link it to things that you're experiencing in your life and ways to get better and ways to help people and so on, then suddenly it becomes kind of animated, doesn't it?
So it's so true. You said about the reptilian crawl when we were at IMS4, and one of my clients the other day was like, why are we crawling? And I was like, well, young man, the it's 3.5 million years, and it's in the state of evolution. That's we were reptiles, and that's one of the oldest ingrained things into our DNA. And I was just like, I remember that blowing my mind at IMS4. I was like, that makes so much sense. How we're just like our shoulders have to go up and down, and we have to crawl.
Yeah, and then you can break down why it's good for the shoulder and shit. You know what I mean? 100%. And it's like and then that makes sense too. So the people that need that, you know.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Like, it is sometimes like scary, like using your savings to go up and do a course or something like that. But when you've got
paid off, man, it always pays off.
Dude, it always pays off. It's like, it is scary. It always is scary, but I feel like it's telling you where you need to go.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's yeah.
So for people, like, fly out here. If you're getting into this field and you just want to learn, like, and just throw yourself at it, this is the sort of shit you throw yourself at. Like, fly out here, hang out with the crew anyway. You've got the gym here.
Yeah,
like,
and Matt's got a couple of sessions, like, for people listening.
Oh, yeah.
You've got a couple of sessions available. We're trying to pretty much fill them up. Like, I've already got like 2 people that want to work with you while you're here. But how much availability do you have? Like, if someone who's in, like, I would suggest if you're in a fair bit of pain, or if you've got you're not getting many answers, like, Matt's very advanced. So, like, if you really need help, reach out to us and we'll get that booked in. But when were you looking at kind of working with you had like 2 days free or so, or?
Yeah, so it's the last 2 days of February, so it must be 27th, 28th.
Yeah,
it's the Thursday and Friday that I've got clear. I might have to have a little bit of time off.
Yeah, I've got to say,
but we'll see, because we're doing this IMS4, aren't we? Which is a 9-day course.
Man.
Then I've got 2 days off, and then we're doing Scientific Core, and then my workshop on the Sunday, which is called Preventing Your Past from Thieving Your Future. So I'm doing those 2 on the weekend. But I've got 2 days prior to that where I can potentially see people, and it'll be fun. I mean, it's people think of it as perhaps as work, but actually, it's just great fun to work with people and try and solve the puzzle of what's going on with them, do things to help them and give them tools to get themselves better, So yeah, we'll have that definitely available on that, especially on the Friday.
And what does that look like for someone listening, like hour wise and like price range, and so it's all just like, so I can just tell people if you work with you.
Well, so my hourly fee is £225. So we have to, what I normally do in terms of, because it's not a cheap consultation, but what I do is I say, okay, well, look, let's talk before we do this. So obviously, if someone's interested in having a consult, then initially we just work out, am I offering what they're looking for? And that conversation, assuming that goes well, then what we then do is send some forms to them. So things like the health appraisal questionnaire, and a couple of other forms for them to fill in. And what that does is it saves time in the consultation. So the whole point is, when we're together, we want to get the biggest bang for your buck. So you get the information in advance, which tells me about their, back pain or their knee pain or their gut issue or whatever combination of things they've got. And so I look through that and I say, okay, well, look, this is a really complex case. We could do with 3 hours here, or this is a simple case, or it's just one thing that we're looking at. Maybe an hour would be enough. And of course, it always relates to the person's budget and their time availability, and as well, because what I'm not trying to do is stress them out by telling them, the only way I can work with you is for a full day, and they're kind of looking at their bank account going, oh my god, or their diary and thinking, I haven't got time. So we always try and get the right balance that's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, and then from there, it's we kind of plan it together. So we agree it together. Yeah, we're going to do a 2-hour consult, and we'll look at this, and this, and I'll send you away with an exercise program and some nutritional advice or whatever it is. So then we're kind of customizing it to what they're looking for and what I think they need. It's kind of a mixture of the two. So that's how I typically work, is to have that little bit of interaction in advance, so that then, like I say, when we're together, we can completely focus in on what needs to be done.
Cool.
Yeah, I think there's going to be even we would feel that even without the people listening. So if you are listening, probably jump on it ASAP. Because I already know, like, just the circle would jump in that
100%.
So yeah, that'd be amazing, man. Like, and I'd love to. I can't wait to see you integrate it, like what we go over in IMS like I'm so excited for it, you know, because it's always like,
Yeah.
it's like the next thing, you know, like once I did the Diane stuff, it's like now I need something else to look forward to, you know, and just like grab stuff from and integrate it as much as I can. And I'm actually really passionate about, I guess the shoulder at the moment. I just like, that's just what I'm into. It's just like, so I'm just liking it more than other spots. And I know we go heavy into all those shoulder tests and things like that. Cause I've watched a lot of them.
We spent
like
about a day and a half on that.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and all the neck stuff, and and then one day I feel like I'll start moving towards the forearms or something, but they don't have my attention as much yet.
Yeah, for sure.
But what was your favorite bit about IMS4?
Definitely the cervical stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like definitely the Atlas stuff, and I feel like that's helped me more than anything so far. And then the shoulder stuff though, I was a little tired, like I remember them all, and I went over them again when I got home, but all the tests, but I have, to be honest, haven't put it fully into practice because it's like there's so much. So I'm looking forward to going over that again, and that's my goal really, is just to really wrap my head around that. As like the Atlas was what I just was like in love with, and actually what blew me away was the first day about the psyche. I was just like, that was amazing. But yeah, the Atlas stuff, I was just like glued in, and I retained a lot of that information because I loved it so much. So I'm hoping this time I'll really focus on the shoulder too. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be open to it all. Yeah,
to have a Chek course and sleep in my own bed.
yeah,
and eat my own food, not to worry about what cafe I'm going to, all this shit. I'm like, it's just I'll be able to actually build energy and like integrate it, you know, instead of just being like tired of catching trains and shit around Sydney all the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, Sydney's a different animal, but like to be honest, like at Paul's house, it's like it's friggin' special, eh? It's like I don't know, like the energy, they got biogeometry everywhere. The energy is just so incredible.
Yeah, the one in Sydney was like a little like this den.
yeah.
But it's so good here because it's on the water and that here, man. So hopefully it's not too hot. Yeah, should be end of Feb should be all right.
Yeah, I mean it starts cooling down like start of March. Like it can get cool pretty quick in March. So hopefully it just starts to cool off a little bit while you're here because it's been hot lately.
It's been hot, man. Fuck.
Right.
Yeah, it's been hot. But it has cooled down a little bit lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have some fans in that rolling.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll just G it all up. So I can't wait to see like what sort of crew are here. And
we really should get to promoting it. But
I mean that one's promoted, hey, because it's done now.
Oh yeah, not IMS4. I meant like back pain workshop. Yeah. And then not back pain workshop.
Scientific Core.
Scientific Core.
And let's touch on the second day. I'd love to talk about that a little bit of the other workshop that you're passionate
Preventing, what was it again?
Preventing from thieving your future.
Yeah, that's
cool. So the basic theme of it, and I should just say this isn't specifically for practitioners or therapists, although it is absolutely for them as well. What I'm doing with this one is I'm kind of lowering the price of it so that it's more accessible to more people, and it's more of a sort of work on yourself type thing.
That's awesome.
And so it's based around, again, evolution and understanding the emotions from an evolutionary perspective. And it's based on the model that I showed you, Callan, back in 2020, which is called the primal dialectics model. And so essentially, there's 8 different elements to this primal dialectics model, and this is what I'll go into to introduce the whole course. Those different elements. So essentially, they relate to like the light dark cycle, the inspiration expiration cycle, the eating fasting cycle, and then the movement rest cycle, right? And this was a concept I came up with around 2006, and without going into a long sort of explanation about it, it's essentially an evolutionary model. And so I've been using that a little bit with my clients over the years and just developing my thinking around it. And then I started to realize it completely integrates with the 4 doctors model. It's like, it's almost identical, but rather than coming at it from this kind of perspective, which, again, a lot of your listeners probably already know about the 4 doctors, but you've got Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. And the idea is that they're the last 4 doctors you'll ever need, right? So as long as you consult with those guys regularly, you don't need any other doctors. And so what I started to realize is that actually there's this huge overlap between the doctor model and the dialectic model. But the dialectic model is really using evolutionary principles. So it's a little bit more, it's probably perhaps more accessible to the scientific mind, whereas the Four Doctors concept is a bit more cartoon-like in a way. You kind of imagine going to consult this doctor, and that's
Yeah.
cool as well because it's more because it's kind of fun and simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But so then, just developing my thinking with it over the years, one of the things I picked up around the Chek system was that, we are brilliant on the physical side, and we talk about the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual approach to working with people. And we do work on the emotional, mental, spiritual, quite significantly as well. But it felt to me like a lot of it was more mindset and mental programming and this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, we do talk a bit about the emotions, like in the health appraisal questionnaire that we use, it screens for depression, anxiety, and anger. So we got that. But it's kind of like there's this whole field of emotions that's out there, that obviously studied in psychology, and all these different models of emotion. We don't have a strong model to work with in terms of addressing these challenges for our clients. So I started looking into these different models, and there's Goleman's got a model and Ekman's got a model, and then I found this guy called Plutchik, and Plutchik's model is essentially what he I'm trying to think the name of it. He calls it his flower of emotions, I think. No, it's got another name, but it looks like a flower the way that it's arranged on the diagram. And essentially, what he says, there's certain primary emotions that are polarized to each other, so they're in a kind of dialectic, right? They're in a conversation with each other. And I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this fits with my dialectics model. And so actually what you can see is that there's this connection between the emotions and the physical actions that we may or may not take in terms of, eating right, fasting right, sleeping right, getting exposed to sunlight, breathing right, moving right, all that kind of stuff. So there's these correlations where actually eating is an embodiment of trust, right? So trust is an emotion. It's one of the primary emotions. And if you have trust issues, you're likely to have eating issues, right? So you can see a correlation, because eating is all about bringing something into you and not rejecting it. So the opposite, if you have rejection issues, then you might have issues with fasting, right? And so, so it's like each of the components of the model correlates exactly with an emotion. And beyond that, you've got these 8 primary emotions, which fits beautifully with the dialectics. But then you also have kind of composite emotions that are made up. Like if you combine, say, fear with sadness, then that creates a third emotion, right? And so you end up with this whole field of emotions by studying Plutchik's. He calls it his wheel of emotions. That's it. It just came to me. And so what you end up with is this landscape of emotions that you can explore, both through working emotionally, but also working physically with the body, applying the principles that we use in the Chek system. It's just, it helps you to sort of direct where your attention should be and what are going to be the best interventions. So what I do in the workshop is I explain that to you with a bit more clarity, sort of take you through it step by step with some slides and some images and so on. And then go into a coaching kind of process where you can either do it on yourself, on your own, and kind of go through the questions and answer questions which explore each of these core emotions, each of these sort of primary emotions. And then what you do is you start to turn them around. So it's almost like an alchemical process. You look at the emotion, you look at someone that's triggered that emotion in your life, or in a situation that's triggered that emotion. Normally it's emotive, right? You've got a kind of sense of embodiment of that emotion if you feel it somewhere in your body. And so then what you do is you look at the opposite to that, and you start to say, well, what's the opposite to that? What, if I felt bad, does sometimes is sometimes there a good outcome to that? Like with an injury, you generally feel bad with an injury, but normally there's a good outcome to it because you normally learn something new, you change your habits, you change your behaviors, you learn a lot from it, and so on. It's the idea of the pain teacher, right? So what we do is we kind of turn it around to look at it from all angles, and ultimately what that does is it kind of diffuses the charge that's held by that emotion in your system, right? So you can be holding an emotion of anger or holding an emotion of grief, but by taking a look at that from all angles and recognizing the benefits of it, so it's really like a pain teacher kind of process. What you start to learn is you've got all kinds of benefits from that huge trauma, and so then it doesn't change your past. You can't change the past, but you can prevent your past from thieving your future, because if you don't address it and unwind it and diffuse it, then you just hold that tension in your system, and essentially that becomes allostatic load, right? It becomes physiological load that weighs you down.
Man,
so that's the process, and the nice thing about Plutchik's wheel is that it's essentially a whole field of the primary human emotions, so you can look through those emotions and pick out the ones that are most relevant to you, and there's a process of like I say, diffusing them and then essentially embodying a new relationship with that emotion.
That's so cool. I can't wait. It's practical. That's
Yeah,
what I need.
practical.
Yeah, that's what I need. Yeah. Oh man, that's great. I'm excited for that. Because it's like, you can do all the work on this education, but if you get that, there's the whole education of the psyche that we need to work on too. Like, and some guys sometimes get left behind,
Well, when you start studying any of these things, you realize there's more to any field. There's more to any field than you could possibly ever learn. And so one of the key things I think that I've come to recognize is that if we can find good models that help to simplify the complex, then that means that we can work our way through and have quite a profound effect, rather than going into all the minutiae. And so we talked before about attractors, and so these kind of primal dialectics are a form of attractors in human health, and so that's true of human physical health, but also, as I say, you can link it right in with human emotional health. And so the idea is that you can come to the workshop and work on your own shit, if you like, which is always a great place to start.
Fuck yeah.
But then you've got the tools to take that back, and if you want to share it with friends or partners, or you're a practitioner or a professional and you want to use it with your clients, now you've got a whole system that you can engage with your clients. And it's brilliant work because it's profound. You're working with people's emotions, you're working with their kind of operating system, and they become profoundly grateful when they make these changes and they see the world through a different lens. But also just, it's great coaching because you can work through this stuff for months with clients because they love it, and it bit by bit unloads their system, which is what you want. So that they
that's cool.
More free.
That's what I definitely need to move into, because it's like I'm still in the physical. I'm still like at the start of the journey, really. Still like all these people you talk about. I'm still ordering their books and having to go through it. I just got all into Shirley Salmon stuff. So I've just found her, Shirley Salmon. Shirley.
Oh yeah, good.
So I've just ordered her two of her books, the main ones, and then just on YouTube and podcasts. And I'm like, oh, this is an amazing woman. Didn't even know what she looked like. Like, she's 86 or something, man. She's got a YouTube video out there of her exercise routine she does to not lose her mobility as she ages.
Cool.
And I was like,
Really?
it's gold. Like if it was another 86-year-old watching it, they can relate.
Yeah.
And it's funny, what she talks about is this another roundabout way of like everyone gets to similar things, movement patterns, right?
Yeah.
She calls it the movement, but then I think primal movements and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm really into her at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Man, this is
She's great.
been great. It always flies. It's I'm gonna
Yes.
get my steak on the stove in a second because Jake's got his missus at home cooking dinner for him, but I don't, so I got to get rolling. But
Sounds good.
But yeah, so super looking forward to it for all the listeners.
Yeah. How do they book in? Like where do they go to book in?
Yeah. So obviously for the scientific core, it'll be on the Chek Institute site.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I don't know 100%, but there's going to be a code for Corrective Culture listeners.
Okay.
And Gavin did say it might be something like CC20 or it might be CC10.
Cool.
So it depends what level of discount we're going to offer.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think it'll be something very simple like that. So perhaps we can pop that in the show notes once we know what the actual code is.
And
I'm going to do a CC20 on mine as well. So
cool.
If people want to, your listeners want to come along, then they get 20% off with that code.
We'll do a video too leading up, like, and especially when you're here, we can, maybe one Arvo when we finish the course, we can just do some stories and stuff and promote it.
Yeah. I'm pumped. And everyone will be here. We'll be here. So if you guys want to all catch up
and meet. It's going to be fucking crazy.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be
a bit of a trip.
Yeah, it'll be a trip.
Yeah.
Harry will be there, filming. We'll get some cool
a bunch
clips
of content and looking forward to it. And dude, I was going to say, you're doing awesome with your content on Facebook.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Been loving that, man.
Same,
it's been
man.
sick. Like, do you put them on Instagram as well?
Yeah, they should be going on Instagram. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Because it's helpful, man. Like, I got onto the blood glucose monitor from it. I've been dealing with some gut stuff, so I was listening to your gut video today. Part 2 it's cool. Like, man, people got to hear that shit. Like, it's so good and in depth and just well said.
It's nice hearing.
I think we get used to, like you said earlier, Callan, we just get used to talking about this stuff, and it's quite natural to us to talk about doing a cleanse or taking a certain herb or something, but you forget that that's not normal.
For sure. And even if you know it, like sometimes, because they're short videos you're doing, they're like under 5 minutes usually. And I think that like it's a good refresher, even like for someone who knows a bit about gut health, like myself. It's good to like just get refreshed. You can hear the same thing so many times. Like,
and it's good to see, like, for all the people that only see you as the Chek faculty courses guy. You know what I mean? Like when they see you in your home, it's different. It's really is good. Like,
see what you're into, and
we've always spoke about it. Like the videos, everyone. Well, with everyone, but I know like we like to see it, Paul, and that also do well for some of our stuff. It's just like him at home making a coffee, talking about something random. Like that you feel like you're there, you're in the room, so you feel like it's like we all know Joe Rogan,
exactly,
So it's cool seeing you do stuff like that because it only creates and it only helps. It can never hurt. So it's only, like you said, it helped him and it's.
Oh yeah, I got so much out of that blood glucose monitor. I'm frothing.
Cool.
So cheers for that, Matt.
All right, man.
That's pleasure.
Well, we'll chuck all the stuff in the show notes and we'll be in touch. And I'm so looking forward to it, man. We go straight to Japan soon, and then we come back and we go right into that, and it's like life's good, life's so good.
Yeah, that's amazing. Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to it too. So we'll be actually in each other's presence in about 3-4 weeks, something like that.
It'll be sick, man. We'll do a big dinner one night. It'll be sick.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Much love.
Thank you.
All
Matt.
right. Thanks, guys. See you soon.